Hello everyone and welcome. It's Morgana here with today's video tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to paint this beautiful calm sea scene with some lovely white sailboats and a little spattering of seabirds. I began by drawing out my sailboats. This outline for these will be available to download online from my Patreon page. I'll pop a link down below and some more info later. But for now you can see that I've just masked out these lovely sailboats because I want to keep them nice and white. So I'm using Pebeo drawing gum and I've also spattered a little bit across the foreground here, like along the lower third where the sea is going to be, just to give us a nice little hint of white sparkle when we come to paint that in later. Just used a toothbrush for that, flicking it, dipping a little toothbrush in and flicking it, you can get a lovely effect. But to begin with, I'm going to be painting in the sky, so I've just popped a little piece of masking tape along the horizon line, just going along the bottom of my little sailboats to keep that line nice and crisp. And I'm going to do a really lovely simple sky today using wet and wet technique, although really I am only using one colour, so it literally is wet on wet, on paint, wet paint on wet paper. So just covering this whole sky section, the top 2/3, with nice clean fresh water. And we're using cobalt blue for today's sky. A lovely clean blue colour, there's nothing quite like it. I'm just going to sweep that on in big movements with my large brush. Because I'm using only a single colour today, a single blue, I want to get a little bit of texture in this sky, so I'm varying the tone of the cobalt sort of as I go along, some slightly darker patches and some lighter patches. It almost feels a little like cheating to say one colour only, because of course we have another colour which is the white of the paper, which I'm utilising here today for some sort of hints of cloud. I'm going to have them coming in, sweeping in from the sort of top right corner. You can see I'm using my sweeping brush movements to mimic that sweep of cloud and leaving some white paper there so we get some lovely soft white cloud formations coming in there from the right. To highlight that, I'm just adding in a little more blue down in that bottom left corner just to emphasize the contrast. And just moving the paint around with my nice big brush until I'm happy with the way it's lying on the paper. I can afford to do these nice sort of big streaks and know that the longer I leave them, the more they will diffuse whilst the paper is wet. Another little technique I'm just going to show for you today is using a piece of just ordinary tissue, and I've folded it up to get a nice crisp line, and then you can place that on the paper or drag it along and get these sort of crisp white lines which look like sort of those soft fluffy sort of lines of cloud or trails of sort of perhaps vapor trails left by passing planes. You get this lovely crisp look. You just the tissue just really easily pulls the paint out while it's nice and wet. Do be sure to either keep refolding or changing over your tissue so you're using a clean piece each time, otherwise the paint will, well, it will just go straight back onto the paper and it will contaminate the area that you're trying to keep white. So do bear that in mind. Now you can see there just a little bit of tissue left on the paper. There's just a tiny little fleck. These are really easily and simply removed just using a small clean dry brush. Do make sure that it is clean and just gently lift them off. And I'm just wiping up any excess paint that's gone down the side there as well. To remove the masking tape, simply take one side and peel it slowly and carefully away. I always try and do mine directionally and quite slowly just to make sure it doesn't pull up any paint by accident or leave a wibbly wobbly line. And just use another bit of tissue to just clean up the tape on either side, just to prevent any cauliflowers forming, any paint sort of spilling over. So this is how it looks like now that it's dried. You can see we've got this lovely soft cobalt sky here that I'm so pleased with. I think it looks really lovely and just, oh, I wish I was under that sky right now, in fact. Just looks like a lovely place to be. So now I'm going to fill in the bottom part. This is going to be our sea. So again, I'm using a wet and wet technique here and my lovely big brush to just get a nice bit of clean fresh water on again. You can see I'm being a little more careful this time. I don't want to go over that horizon line because as soon as I put water back onto that paint, it's going to start moving around again and we're going to get lines and bumps and bubbles. I don't really want, so just trying to keep it below the horizon line. It's quite difficult. I think I do go over at one point, but it doesn't look too bad. Now for our sea colours, I want it obviously to harmonise with our sky above, but often the sea can have a slightly warmer sort of greenish tinge to it. So I'm using cobalt blue again mixed with some cerulean blue just to sort of warm it up a little bit and give it a little bit of difference from our sky. And you can see I'm putting it on very pale to begin with. Always like working from light through to dark with watercolor. And simply put, just pop on as many sort of layers and as much colour as you feel comfortable with until you get the colour that makes you happy. This is what I did here. See, I'm still very pale and just slowly sort of building up the colour, taking little bits of cerulean, little bits of cobalt from my palette and just sort of popping them on. I want the colour to be slightly richer and deeper the closer it gets to the bottom of the paper, i.e. so the closer it is to us, the theoretical viewer, if we were looking at this through a camera lens. So we're going to go with a little bit darker in the foreground, and the closer it gets to our sailboats, I want to keep that nice sort of light blue sort of tinge, the idea that the light is sort of bouncing off the sea almost and giving us almost that lovely glow in the water. So the cerulean blue that I'm using today is a Winsor & Newton Cotman brand cerulean. It's got a lovely tinge to it. It's one of my favourite colours. And the cobalt blue that I'm using is actually from the Davidson's Pigments paint range, which is mine and my mum's handmade paint range. It'll be available for purchase soon in our Etsy store, which I will link below. My mum, for those of you who don't know, is Lois Davidson from Lois Davidson Watercolor art channel, which I will link below. She is a far better artist than I can ever hope to be. But I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm really pleased with how this particular painting came out today. And I really hope you guys enjoy watching it as well. Painting this was a really sort of restful, meditative experience for me. Find that sometimes with a painting that goes well, it can just be good for the soul, I think. And that's provided it all goes well. Of course, we've all had those moments of tear-stained frustration, I'm sure, when something just doesn't go right or just goes wrong right at the end when you've put all that effort in and it just goes. Sometimes it just goes. And there's nothing you can do about it, except to sort of pick yourself up and think, well, I know what not to do next time. You can see I'm just putting in these careful lines now with the cobalt blue and my large brush, and just giving you a little imitation there of the sort of swell and heave of the waves in that beautiful blue sea. I'm just wiping off my brush, sort of dampening it down so that I can pull a little bit of the colour out of this sort of mid-ground here, this further patch of ocean, which, as I said earlier, I want to be quite pale. And just sort of pulling that colour out a little bit there, just so we get a little bit more contrast with the lovely rich colour we have right in the foreground. And there we have a lovely simple sea and sky. I'm not going to do anything more to those except just remove the masking fluid. This is just the little spatters that I put on earlier with just splattering with a toothbrush. It's very slight, you can just see it just gives a little extra sparkle to the water. It's entirely optional, but I just really like the effect that you get from it. You just rub it away with a clean, dry fingertip, as I'm doing here, and just brush off the little bits of latex that you get left over. I'm also just going to remove the masking fluid now from our sailboats as well. There we are, got our lovely sailboat outlines nice and clean. And now for this part of the painting, I'm going to introduce a little bit of ultramarine blue and a fine detail brush. I'm just going to use the ultramarine at first to pop in some lovely shadows on this boat. I would recommend using the sort of finest brush you can find, because these boats really are quite small, as you can see, and the finer the brush, the easier you will find popping in these little details and actually sort of getting them where you want to be. So I'm just putting a lovely soft blue shadow down the left side of the hull of the boat, a little bit down the line of that sail there, because in my mind we've got the sun coming in from the right, from that top right corner, following the directionality we've got in those lovely sort of soft white clouds we've got going on. So popping in the shadows on the left side seemed right to me. Of course, feel free to pop them in on the other side if you'd rather, whichever works best for you, but this is how I'm doing it today. I'm also going to use 2 more colours for the detail on this boat. At the moment I'm using a little light red, which is a wonderful rich colour. I think it's misnamed. I think light red is too poor a name for what this wonderful colour is. It's very rich, and I'm just using it quite scarcely to put in a little bit of detail just to catch the eye on our lovely boat. So a little bit along the sail and a little bit along the hull, just to give the impression of perhaps some branding, the name of the boat, some colour on the sail that you might spy perhaps from a distant shore through binoculars. I'm also going to use a little Payne's Grey, which is my other colour, and that's going to be used to just darken down here. As you can see, I'm just putting it on the mast, putting a little bit more on the sail, and I'm going to use it to pick out some details on the boat's hull. A black as well would work well here, black ink or black watercolor, or in fact even a black fine liner if you prefer. If you find that easier to control, get a lovely fine line to use, because I'm also using it to put in this rigging here. Just a very fine line going up from the boat hull up to the sail top there, just giving that extra little details. Now it can take some time, of course, to get all those little details right. Don't feel like you need to rush or, hurry it along. Just slow and careful, and you get it all right in the end. So I'm happy with this little boat now. I'm going to pop the camera ahead a little bit and fill in the other two boats off camera, just because it's exactly the same process as you've just seen, just on one slightly smaller boat and one slightly larger boat. I've also slightly varied the colours that I've used, so that light red I've put in slightly different places on the sail, you'll be able to see, just to give a little bit of variation, a little bit of interest, so they don't all look like stamped out copies of exactly the same boat. And now for a finishing touch. What is the sea without its seabirds? Those of you who watch my videos regularly will know that I can't resist popping in a little flight of birds, particularly on a sea scene, and today is no exception. So again, I'm just using my fine detail brush and a little Payne's grey mixed down. I think I mixed it down with a touch of ultramarine blue, just so the silhouettes weren't too sort of dark, they didn't jump too much out of the page. And just putting in a lovely little flight of birds, moving from right to left, sort of up towards the top corner. And just if you fancy just a little bit of extra detail, I'm using some opaque white to put a little bit of white detail along the top of the bird's wings. Just if you fancy making them a little bit more than just a dark shape in the sky. I must admit, this technique tends to work a little better if you have a stronger colour in your sky. Because I washed out the cobalt quite a lot while I was doing the clouds, the white you can see isn't standing out hugely here, but perhaps if you had a much richer coloured sky, something stronger, deeper, or if you had a sunset scene perhaps, that would stand out a little more. And here we are, this is the finished painting. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. Really simple, really effective, really enjoyable to paint. Please take my word for it. This one's great fun, so if you're going to have a go at any of the tutorials on this channel, I would recommend this one very heartily. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I'll pop a link to my Patreon page down below if you're interested in downloading the outlines for these sweet little boats, along with there's a whole host of other downloadable outlines and free use reference photos as well that you can use for your own artwork and inspiration. But that's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think of the idea of a scene similar to this with these beautiful sailboats, but perhaps with a different setting, so perhaps a night sky setting or a sunset setting. I think both of those would look rather fine. But thank you everybody for watching. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely rest of the day. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video.